The studio lights were blinding, the kind that made even seasoned politicians squint. The network's primetime panel on America's Future in Foreign Policy was already trending on social media before the guests even walked out. On the left of the semicircle stage sat Representative Jasmine Crockett, blue blazer crisp, posture sharp, eyes scanning the studio like she had already read the script and didn't care for it. On the opposite side, former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley adjusted her microphone with the ease of someone used to this kind of stage. The two had been booked for different reasons, Haley to defend her recent comments about restoring American strength, Crockett to challenge the policies she believed weakened everyday Americans. The host, a slick-haired anchor who'd mastered the art of the pointed pause, leaned in with his first question about military spending. Haley took the lead, speaking smoothly about projecting power and sending clear messages to our adversaries. Her delivery was polished, her tone confident, but the subtext was clear: this was her turf. Crockett listened without flinching, her hands folded on the desk, waiting. The second question came like a slow pitch aimed at stirring heat. Representative Crockett, Ambassador Haley has said America must return to a posture of unapologetic leadership on the world stage. How do you respond? Haley turned slightly toward Crockett, a faint smirk tugging at her lips, as if daring her to cross a line. Jasmine leaned forward just enough to close the space between them without speaking over the host. She didn't rush. She didn't fill the air with preamble. She looked Haley straight in the eye, as if peeling away the rehearsed lines to get to the truth beneath them. And when she spoke, the temperature in the studio shifted. The audience didn't know it yet, but they were seconds away from the 5 words that would turn this segment into the clip everyone would be watching by morning. Haley kept her smirk, tapping her pen against the desk. The problem, she said, is that too many people are comfortable criticizing America's strength without offering real solutions. You can't lead the world if you're busy apologizing for it. The audience murmured in approval from her side, the kind of polite clapping that says we like the sound, not the substance. The host glanced toward Crockett, clearly expecting a counterpunch, maybe even hoping for a shouting match to spike the ratings. But Jasmine didn't take the bait. She adjusted her blazer, leaned back slightly, and let the silence work for her. Every second she didn't speak made Haley's posture tighten. The lights reflected off Crockett's eyes in a way that made them look sharper, more deliberate. She began, her voice steady, "Ambassador Haley, strength without accountability isn't leadership, it's theater." The host's brows lifted. This wasn't the 5 words yet, but the tone had shifted. Haley interjected quickly, "Accountability is making sure our enemies know." Crockett raised a hand, palm toward Haley but not in dismissal, more like she was holding the conversation still. "No, accountability," she continued, "is making sure the people here at home aren't paying the price for your photo ops overseas." A ripple went through the crowd, a blend of applause and gasps. Haley's jaw tensed. She started to fire back, but Crockett was already leaning forward again, her voice dropping just enough to force everyone to lean in. "You talk about unapologetic leadership," Crockett said, her tone now carrying the weight of someone who'd lived the costs of bad policy. "But leadership is not a podium, Ambassador, it's the people who can't afford to buy the flag you're waving." She paused, long enough for Haley to open her mouth again. Then Crockett delivered the line, 5 words, precise as a blade: "Your strength forgets the people." It wasn't shouted. It didn't need to be. Those 5 words landed with the force of a gavel. The words seemed to hang in the air, heavier than the bright stage lights. Even the cameraman nearest to Haley shifted his lens slightly toward Crockett, instinctively knowing where the story was now. Haley's smirk faltered, replaced by a tightness in her jaw that she tried to mask with a faint, practiced smile. The host glanced between them like a referee sensing a foul coming but unwilling to blow the whistle. Haley went for a pivot, her voice sharpening, "Congresswoman, with all due respect, you're twisting my point. Strength is what keeps us safe. Without it, we invite chaos." Crockett didn't blink. "Chaos for who?" she asked, her voice calm but with an edge that cut through the set's warm background music. "Because where I'm from, we've had chaos for decades, and it didn't come from weakness. It came from leaders chasing headlines abroad while ignoring the headlines at home." She shifted her gaze to the audience, breaking the invisible wall that most politicians cling to. You want to talk about safety? Let's talk about the families rationing insulin, the veterans waiting 6 months for a doctor's appointment, the neighborhoods where a single broken water main wipes out an entire week's paycheck. Tell them about strength. The studio audience, usually trained to keep reactions polite, couldn't hold back a few scattered claps. Haley's eyes narrowed, her smile now a straight line. "You're conflating national security with domestic policy," she said. "And you're pretending they're separate," Crockett replied, the words snapping like a rubber band. The host raised a hand as if to step in, but Crockett wasn't finished. "You can't fly the banner of global leadership while leaving your own people in the dust. That's not patriotism, it's performance." There it was again, not the 5 words, but the same energy they carried. A slow-building force, pushing Haley further off her prepared script and into territory she couldn't control. Haley leaned forward now, abandoning the relaxed posture she'd carried at the start. "Representative Crockett," she began, her voice clipped, "you act like I don't care about the American people. I've spent my career fighting for this country, at the UN, as governor, every day." Her words came faster, each one laced with the urgency of someone trying to reclaim lost ground. Crockett tilted her head slightly, almost as if she were studying Haley, not just listening. "I don't doubt you fought," she said evenly. "The question is, who wins when you do?" The host's eyebrows twitched, even he knew that was a pivot Haley couldn't ignore. Haley tried to steer the conversation toward foreign policy success stories, but Crockett didn't let her get there. "See, the people I represent, they're not asking me about summit dinners or photo ops with foreign ministers. They're asking why their cousin came home from serving overseas and couldn't get the VA to return his calls. They're asking why our infrastructure still crumbles while we send billions elsewhere with no plan for accountability." Her tone wasn't angry, it was surgical. Every example was a thread pulling at Haley's broader narrative. Haley opened her mouth to counter, but Crockett continued, layering the pressure. "Leadership means you don't get to separate the flag from the faces of the people who live under it. And those faces? They're tired, Ambassador. They're tired of being told they're the strongest nation on earth while they're standing in line at a food bank." A hush fell over the audience. The lights, the cameras, even the faint hum of the studio seemed to fade for a moment. Haley shifted in her seat, crossing her legs the other way, a small tell that the exchange had rattled her. Crockett leaned back, letting the silence fill the space. "Strength without the people," she repeated softly, "is just a shadow." And the echo of her earlier 5 words seemed to settle deeper into the room. The host cleared his throat, sensing that the exchange had moved beyond talking points into something rawer, less controllable. "Let's keep the conversation focused," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. The audience wasn't looking at him, they were watching Crockett, waiting for her next move. In the control room, a producer whispered urgently into a headset, "Clip that moment, 5 words, mark it for replay." They knew television gold when they saw it. Within minutes, snippets were already being posted by viewers at home, screen-recorded straight from the live feed. On Twitter, hashtags began to surface, hashtag Strength Forgets the People and hashtag Crockett vs. Haley. Haley tried to reclaim the narrative. "We're here to talk policy," she said, voice firm, "not trade slogans." But Crockett didn't let it slide. "Funny you call it a slogan," she replied, "when it's the truth for millions of Americans you claim to serve." The audience broke into scattered applause, some nodding, some leaning forward as if they didn't want to miss a word. The host attempted to pivot to another panelist, but Crockett redirected, her voice steady but loaded. "Ambassador, this isn't about you versus me, it's about whether leadership in this country is measured by press releases or by the lives actually improved." Haley exhaled through her nose, a subtle sign of frustration. "Improving lives starts with keeping America safe," she shot back. "And keeping America safe," Crockett countered, "means remembering that the front line isn't always a battlefield, it's a broken streetlight, a locked pharmacy, an empty dinner table." The words landed heavy, not as a zinger, but as truth. Viewers at home began sharing their own stories under the trending hashtags: veterans, single parents, small-town business owners, all echoing that safety and strength had to start with the people, not just the politics. In less than an hour, Crockett's 5 words were no longer just a line in a debate, they were a rallying cry. Haley's smile returned, but this time it looked thinner, almost mechanical. She straightened in her chair, shoulders squared, as if posture alone could rebuild the authority she'd lost. "I respect your passion, Representative Crockett," she began, her tone slower now, "but passion doesn't keep our enemies at bay. Strategy does." Crockett didn't move, didn't blink. "And what's the strategy when the enemies aren't across an ocean?" she asked, her voice low, deliberate. "What's the plan for the enemy that's medical debt? Or homelessness? Or a school that still has asbestos in the ceiling?" Her words weren't rapid fire, they were measured, the kind that stick because there's nowhere to hide from them. Haley's eyes flickered toward the host, perhaps hoping for an intervention. None came. The camera cut to Crockett, catching the subtle arch of her brow. "You talk about defending America's future," Crockett continued, "but if you don't defend the people living in its present, what exactly are you defending?" The audience hummed, a soft chorus of agreement mixed with unease. This wasn't the kind of exchange you could reset with a diplomatic smile. Haley leaned in, voice tightening. "We can't afford to be naive about the threats we face." "Naive," Crockett repeated, tasting the word like it was foreign. "I've seen the threats. I've lived in their shadow. And I'll tell you something, none of them carried a foreign flag." The sentence landed like a slow punch, the kind that forces a pause. Somewhere in the second row, a young veteran in a worn leather jacket nodded, his eyes fixed on Crockett. The camera caught it, a silent endorsement that spoke louder than applause. On social media, the clip was already evolving. Edits pairing Crockett's 5 words with black and white images of struggling families, crumbling infrastructure, and worn-out service members. The narrative wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to everyone who felt forgotten by the kind of strength Haley was selling. The host, sensing the weight of the moment, decided to stir the pot. "Ambassador Haley," he said, "Representative Crockett is clearly challenging the foundation of your definition of leadership. Do you believe her 5 words are fair?" It was a loaded question, and everyone knew it. Haley inhaled, clearly choosing her next move carefully. "I think it's catchy," she said with a tight smile, "but governing isn't about catchphrases. It's about making tough choices the public doesn't always understand in the moment." She leaned back, confident she'd reasserted control. Crockett leaned in. "Catchphrases are for campaigns, Ambassador. This is lived reality. And the public understands plenty, they understand when they're being left out of the equation." She shifted her attention to the audience, speaking directly to them now. "You ever notice how the people telling you to sacrifice the most are the ones sacrificing the least?" A murmur rolled through the crowd, louder this time. Haley tried to cut in. "That's not fair." "No," Crockett interrupted, her voice still even but sharper now, "what's not fair is asking Americans to believe in a version of strength that doesn't have room for them in it." The host tried to steer them to the next question, but Crockett wasn't finished. "Ambassador, you've had decades in public service, and yet entire communities, urban and rural, are still fighting for basic dignity. How many more decades should they wait?" Her gaze locked on Haley, holding her there. The air was tight, electric. This wasn't a soundbite war anymore, it was a values collision, and everyone could feel it. Haley's eyes darted toward the clock above the studio doors. She knew they were running out of time, but Crockett had managed to make every remaining second hers. By now, the hashtag #StrengthForgetsThePeople had crossed 1 million mentions. Commentators were already calling it the line of the night. But in the studio, it was more than a line, it was a mirror, and Haley was standing right in front of it. The host tried once more to regain control. Let's move to closing statements. But Crockett raised a hand slightly, not to interrupt him, but to claim the moment. Before we close, I want to be clear, she said, turning toward Haley. Those 5 words, "Your strength forgets the people," weren't meant to be clever. They were meant to be a reminder. Because too many in power have built careers on forgetting. Haley straightened, her voice firm but defensive. "You're implying that I'm not implying," Crockett cut in smoothly, "I'm observing." "And the people watching tonight? They're observing too. They're the parents who work 2 jobs and still skip meals so their kids can eat. They're the veterans juggling 3 part-time jobs because benefits don't stretch far enough. They're the small-town families watching their hospitals close. They see the same strength you're selling, and they're asking, where are we in that picture?" The audience erupted into applause, breaking the usual decorum of the studio. The sound crew scrambled to balance the levels as the cheers swelled. Haley forced a smile, but her eyes betrayed the strain. She tried to pivot back to foreign policy, but the momentum was gone. Crockett had cemented the framing. The host, half smiling now, leaned toward Crockett. "Representative, are you saying Ambassador Haley's vision leaves Americans behind?" Crockett didn't flinch. "I'm saying any vision that leaves people behind isn't leadership, it's abandonment dressed up as patriotism." The applause grew again, some members of the audience even standing. In the control room, the producer barked into the headset, "This is the headline. This is what runs on every platform." Clips of the exchange were already flooding Instagram and TikTok, each one anchored by the same 5 words, now glowing in bold text over Crockett's image. By the time the host managed to transition to commercial, it was too late. The defining moment had already happened, and everyone knew it. Backstage, the energy was a different kind of electric, tighter, more unfiltered. Staffers darted between dressing rooms, phones buzzing non-stop. A junior producer held up her phone to show another, "Look, 500,000 likes in under 20 minutes." The clip of Crockett delivering her 5 words was already stitched into reaction videos, political commentary feeds, and even meme accounts. Haley's team moved quickly down the hall, their voices low but tense. One aide muttered, "We'll say she oversimplified complex issues." Haley didn't respond. She was scrolling her phone, her jaw tight, the glow of the screen reflecting in her eyes. Every refresh brought more notifications, few of them friendly. Across the hall, Crockett's dressing room was calmer, but not quiet. Her communications director grinned, "We just got a call from a network morning show, they want you on tomorrow." Crockett shook her head slightly. "Not yet. Let it breathe." She knew the value of silence after a moment like this. On Twitter, journalists were already reframing the narrative. Crockett lands blow with simple truth, 5 words that gutted the segment. Haley caught flat-footed in live exchange. Meanwhile, everyday viewers posted their own takes, single moms, veterans, small business owners, each tying their own story to Crockett's line. In the studio corridor, a sound tech passed Crockett and whispered, "You said what my dad's been saying for years, he just didn't have the mic." Crockett smiled politely but didn't slow her stride. By the time she stepped outside into the cool night air, her phone was buzzing non-stop with texts from friends, allies, and even a few political opponents, some congratulatory, others warning her to brace for backlash. She slipped it into her bag without checking. Tonight wasn't about the noise. Somewhere inside, the host was still wrapping the post-show debrief. But the real conversation had already left the building, carried by 5 words that no amount of spin could walk back. The ride back to her hotel was quiet, the city light streaking across the car window in thin, gold lines. Crockett sat with her hands folded in her lap, the adrenaline fading, replaced by a steady hum of reflection. Her driver glanced in the rearview mirror. "You really got her tonight," he said with a small grin. Crockett didn't answer right away. "It's not about getting her," she finally replied. "It's about getting through, past the noise, past the talking points, straight to the people who feel invisible. She watched the reflection of the city blur by. If those 5 words stick in someone's head the next time they hear a politician talk about strength, then maybe they'll ask themselves who that strength is really for. Up in her hotel room, she kicked off her heels and sat on the edge of the bed, phone still buzzing on the nightstand. She didn't pick it up. Instead, she opened the curtain, looking out at the city below, streets full of people she'd never meet but whose stories she carried with her. In living rooms, diners, and crowded subway cars across the country, people were still watching the clip. Some nodded quietly. Others teared up. A few got angry enough to demand better. The words had taken on a life of their own, no longer tied to a single broadcast or a single debate. Back in the studio, the host recorded a quick teaser for tomorrow's broadcast. Tonight's fireworks between Representative Jasmine Crockett and Ambassador Nikki Haley have sparked a national conversation. We'll have more in the morning. But Crockett didn't need the recap. She knew the moment was bigger than a headline, it was a reminder. Leadership wasn't measured by how loudly you spoke, or how many flags you stood in front of. It was measured by whether the people at home could see themselves in your vision. And tonight, she'd made sure they could. Tonight was never about scoring points or trading insults, Crockett said, standing center stage as the lights dimmed slightly. It was about asking one simple question: who does your strength serve? Because if the answer isn't the people, every person, then it's not strength at all. She paused, letting her gaze sweep the room. We can debate policy, we can argue over priorities, but at the end of the day, leadership is about making sure no one is left behind. The single mom working 2 jobs. The veteran waiting on a call back from the VA. The rural town losing its only hospital. The city block where kids walk past boarded-up homes to get to school. Those are the front lines. And those are the people I will fight for every single day I'm given this microphone. Turning toward the cameras, she finished, I don't need to be the loudest voice in the room. I just need to be the one that refuses to forget who this fight is for. And I promise you, I won't forget.